Shabbat shalom. Thank you for that. It's very sensitive, although I don't know why it needs to be sensitive. You project. So. Anyway. James and I just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary. Thank you. We decided to go to Las Vegas to celebrate. Actually, we decided to go to Iceland, but that's a whole nother story for a different Devar. So we ended up in Vegas. So as we were playing around with thinking about what to do in Vegas, right, where to eat, what shows to see, James calls out from over behind his iPad, "Hey, we could go renew our vows with Elvis." You did? Right, yeah. So my reply, nothing against the king, but no, we can't. We're Jews. We actually never said vows in the first place. Did you know that? See, here's generally what we know about Jewish weddings. The ketubah, the chuppah, the glass, the rabbi says some stuff that we don't pay much attention to, sorry. In our case, we knew some other things. We knew we didn't want any music. We knew there was going to be no proceeding or reseating. It was just our immediate family at our wedding, 4 of our best friend couples. 1 representative of each couple held the poles for our chuppah, which is James's talit, and kept it above us most of the time. I have pictures, they're great. No circling, and a toast and a nosh after the ceremony, the end. We knew something else, too. Since James and I had each had a starter marriage, that is, since we had each been married previously to other people, we needed to present the rabbi with the evidence of divorce. And here we don't just mean the U.S. legal document. The rabbi needed to see my get, my Jewish divorce document. And because we were then and are now in an egalitarian conservative movement community, he also needed to see the evidence that James had provided a get for his ex-wife. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So what's that about? Well, to understand Jewish divorce, you need to understand Jewish marriage. So just a few words about this. To simplify a very complicated concept, the act of marriage, so the part that changes the parties from one status, which is single, to another status, which is married, is the act of kiddushin. That's the part where he says, Harayat Mekudeshet, I should stop because I'm already married. Buy this ring, you are consecrated to, right? So it sounds a little familiar. That's some of the stuff under the chuppah, we don't pay attention to. Essentially, the woman becomes a wife through the man acquiring her. It's not exactly a transaction of property. She needs to agree in most of the biblical accounts, but neither is it an exchange among equals. Yes, in most ceremonies today, the woman replies to the man by saying, Ani li v'dodi li, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine, which is beautiful and superfluous, right? And the couple usually exchanges rings. That's a very common, is a double ring ceremony, but that's also not required and may even be slightly problematic depending on which rabbi you talk to. There's lots more to say about the marriage ceremony, but for our purposes here, what you need to understand is this. Through kiddushin, the husband acquires the wife in marriage. The wife agrees to be acquired. Bim, bam, boom. No vows to honor, cherish, and, good Lord, obey. That's the stuff of the Hallmark Channel. Sorry, Elvis. Okay. What everybody does agree on, however, is how the woman can regain autonomous status, meaning when she gets out of the marriage, becoming a single person again. Either the husband dies, or the husband must provide the wife with a get, a divorce decree. Again, think of something you own, have, care for. If you die, it's no longer yours, right? It belongs to your estate, or failing that, it goes into probate for distribution. I'm sure there's a lawyer or two here who could explain that. An alternative is to declare what you had acquired is no longer yours. A writ of manumission, if you will. Make you squeamish? Me too. The language is really difficult here. Even though I know this is part of an ancient tradition that reflects historical times and positions of gender, Still feels pretty awful. Now, it's because of this that there are multiple examples of egalitarian ketubot and weddings, and I recommend you talk with your rabbi about those if you are getting married, to live stream or Rabbi Megdal here. Still, in marriage effected through traditional kiddushin, without the intervention of a beit din or a rabbinic court, only the husband has the right to initiate the process of getting a get. And that's still the situation for the vast majority of us in this room and likely on live stream who did not use an egalitarian ceremony, who used the traditional ceremony. With the get, he releases his wife with the words, "You are now permitted to any man." I know. Because the rabbis have long recognized that this can put the woman in an untenable situation, like where a man refuses to provide a get out of spite or is unreachable, etc., there have been a series of innovations to try and address these challenges. Something popular when I was married the first time, the Lieberman Clause, might sound familiar to some of you, attempted to get secular courts to require the husband to initiate a get, but it's not actually clear that the courts would have or could use this power. So it wasn't as helpful as the rabbis had hoped it would be. There's a newer practice in terms of custom, kiddushin al tanai, that puts a condition on the marriage so that if a get is not issued within 6 months of a civil divorce, the marriage automatically dissolves. Definitely talk to Rabbi Megdal about that one. But for most of us who were married traditionally, if the marriage dissolves and the woman wants to marry again, she needs a get. Now, I'll bet I've shocked some of you in this room and those of you on live stream. You had no idea that the standard marriage ceremony was so archaic, gendered, demeaning to women. After all, the lovely prose on your ketubah with the contemporary translation seems so innocuous. Well, surprise, and it gets worse. Let me tell you about receiving my get over 20 years ago now. My civil divorce, which had been amicable, we let the dog decide whom she wanted as a guardian. Let me say it was best 2 out of 3 and there was no contest. My civil divorce was concluded in April. That summer, I moved to a different city. When I got to know the synagogue and the clergy, I reached out to the rabbi and asked about the process of getting my get. Please understand, I was not interested in marriage at that point. In fact, it was years before I even dated anyone seriously, many years into the future. What I wanted was closure. I felt like there was this one thing hanging out there that still tied me to this guy, and I wanted that chapter to be over completely. And that meant that I had to get a get now to ensure I might have an open future. The rabbi said he was happy to help. He emailed me a form to fill out, particulars of who we were, where and when we were married, etc., etc. Then it was hurry up and wait. The rabbi used a Masader Gitin, a get administrator from the eastern US. He worked to contact my ex to get him to authorize the writing of the get. Now check that. I filled out the forms. I was the one who went to my rabbi and said, I want this. I wanted and needed it, but it was my ex who still had to officially initiate it. After some time of not answering, he finally agreed. The get was written and delivered to my rabbi, who acted as the shaliach, the person delivering the document. Good news, the email said, your get is here. Can you be at my office at 7 on Tuesday? Sure, I said. I walked into Shul and to the rabbi's office and was greeted by 3 men I sort of knew from the congregation. Surprise, here's your beit din. So now, 3 random people from my new community knew I was divorced. Now, it's not like it was a secret, but still. Okay, so the rabbi begins and says some stuff, and tells me exactly how to respond, right? Sort of like the wedding, right? He then tells me, we could act this out, but he tells me to open my hands to receive the get, which I do. So I open my hands, he places the get in my hands. He says, now take a few steps that way. So I do, right? And he said, excellent. Now give it back to me so I can send it back to JTS so we can have it filed for you. And I said, okay, now what? He's like, okay, you're done. Congratulations. Bemused, I smiled at the men in the room, walked out alone to my car, and drove home. It remains one of the oddest experiences of my life. and completely devoid of any spiritual meaning. I remember driving home not sure how to feel. Happy? Sad? Relieved? Mostly, I felt lonely. And that was a real surprise to me. I am generally happy with my own company, but this felt like something that was meant to be shared. And I shared it with strangers, essentially. Sadly, my experience is not all that unique. It's bad enough that I had zero agency in that ceremony. Do this, do that, walk this way. This passivity on the part of the woman is compounded by this lack of familiarity. Divorce stands apart from other Jewish life cycle events. In every other scenario, the rabbi meets with the family in advance, both to explain what to expect and to discover where the meaningful elements are to be found for those specific individuals. From Brit Milah to Bar Mitzvah to weddings, the rabbi forms a connection with the family to ensure not simply a halachically rigorous ceremony, but also a personally meaningful one. Consider the stark contrast with the divorce ceremony. In many cases, the conversation an unaccompanied woman has about her get prior to the ceremony are logistical. How long will it take for him to get him to sign off? When can you be here? The woman often arrives at a place set for the ceremony by herself, where she is greeted by a Beit Din she will not have met before for a ceremony for which she is not prepared. She is not provided with a template or much context in advance. She is not offered time for her own reflections. All of this is problematic for at least 3 reasons. First, women are often shocked by the contrast between the apparent equality they had under the chuppah and their passivity in receiving their gitin. Now, we recognize, because of what I've just told you, that this equality is an illusion. The legal infrastructure of these traditional conservative weddings will not have been egalitarian. Yet the inclusion of ceremonies such as an exchange of rings, words spoken by bride to groom, mutual glass breaking in some ceremonies, and even some cases, there are the recital of promises to each other, all will have gone to suggest to a woman that her status was in truth equal to that of her husband. To discover, on the conclusion of a marriage, that this was not the case only amplifies a woman's disillusionment with, and maybe even anger at, a tradition that puts her at such a disadvantage. Secondly, rabbis are missing an opportunity for connection. To the extent that individuals come to Judaism in different ways, for different reasons, and with very different needs, not having a woman-centered, empowering ceremony for get delivery means that rabbis miss a chance to walk with a woman during a major life event. Secrecy breeds a sense of failure. If it were not bad, why wouldn't we talk about it? While the get sometimes is delivered around the same time as the civil divorce document, sometimes it's not given by the husband until years later, often prompted by his wish to remarry. In this case, the woman might be wondering why she has to relive this part of her life. Alternatively, the woman might have been asking for a get for years, and it is only when the husband decides that he's ready that she's able to receive it. Whatever the situation, this is precisely the moment at which our rich tradition should enter. But instead, we leave her to stumble by herself in the dark. We should take advantage of every opportunity to connect or reconnect people with their Judaism in new and meaningful ways. The third reason is that the traditional approach heightens rather than reduces the fear, shame, and stigma some women may feel about divorce. Shrouding the process in mystery robs a woman of the possibility of making meaning because she is instead focused on other, perhaps more worldly issues. What will happen? What do I do? Who will be there? What do I wear? While seemingly inconsequential, in fact, these questions reflect our tradition's failure to prepare women for this life event. Her marriage has ended. She's embarking on a new life stage, and yet there is nothing to help her come to terms with this. Instead, there is what feels to her like a performative and largely incomprehensible legal process that certifies she is, once again, eligible to be married, something that may be far from her mind or plans at that time. It is not insignificant that it is women who face these issues. The history of traditional Judaism is replete with examples of ceremonies and requirements from which women are excluded. Even the biblical requirements to procreate are exclusively attached to men, despite the, at least current, necessity of women to fulfill this role. In this instance, where a woman is prohibited from remarrying unless her husband gives her permission to do so, she is once again the subject of the story, but cannot be the agent of it. With a divorce rate holding constant at 50%, it is long past time to elevate the moment of get delivery to one of dignity rather than shame. The marriage was sanctified through kiddushin, therefore its dissolution should also be imbued with kedusha. Enter the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards and my now friends, Rabbi Jamie Alpert and Rabbi Deborah Silver. Together over a couple of years, we worked to imbue this get-receiving process with holiness and meaning. Now, to be fair, many rabbis are doing this on their own these days. We do not mean to imply that we were the first to think about this. Yet by providing a structure and a set of standard options, we hope that we are normalizing this process so that the next time someone like me calls their new rabbi, that rabbi has resources at their disposal to help make it better. We chose not to tackle rewriting the script of the ceremony itself. There are deep and complicated halachic bits and pieces here and what was going to be a much, much longer enterprise. So we kept that intact. What we played with instead was the choreography, reframing the ceremony and adjusting the balance of its elements. Our goal was to retain both a halachically viable get and to give the woman agency in receiving it, making use of the white spaces around the script that are overdue for exploration. Another place where we could encourage significant change is in the role that rabbis play in advance of the process. It is time for each rabbi to create a set of intake questions, which we gave an example of, for women who will be receiving their divorces, along with a promise to walk with them through the process. Women ought to be briefed about what will happen at the ceremony, be given the opportunity to ask questions about it, and even rehearse it if they wish. Does the woman wish to bring a friend or friends? Inviting female friends is particularly encouraged, bearing in mind that her rabbi, the Beit Din, and the witnesses may all be male, so there is likely to be a significant gender imbalance in the room. Or would she prefer to have the Beit Din meet her in her home or in the chapel rather than in the sanctuary or rather than in an office? Providing full information to women about what they can expect from this process and the ways that they can take active control if they wish to do so restores women's agency at a time when they may be feeling particularly vulnerable. Transparency about the process can enhance a woman's confidence in herself and her connection to the ancient tradition of which she is a part. My dear friends Heather and Mark sent me flowers the morning of the get delivery with a note that I still have in my office that says, "Happy Get Day." None of us had any idea what to expect, and it was their way of telling me that they were thinking of me. Had we known what was involved, they could have been there. Mark as a member of the Beit Din and Heather as a friend and likely participant in the ceremony. But we didn't know. Some may be concerned that if we shed too bright a light on this life stage, we risk exacerbating a woman's or family's distress. Now, respect for individual privacy at this sensitive time is important, but that should be balanced with messages of affirmation so that our lack of discourse around this life cycle event is not tinged with secrecy and shame, both of which can feel oppressive. We lose none of the sanctity of the ritual by making it more meaningful and less opaque, nor do we lose a sense of respect for the tradition from which it came. Instead, we provide a chance for recommitment and reconnection to our ancient legacy and create a space where a woman can walk together with trusted partners as she embarks on a new life stage. So in the Teshuvah, we propose 3 rituals that can be integrated with the traditional script. I will very briefly describe them here. I'm hoping to teach them more fully during the Tikkun Leil Shavuot this year, with the rabbi's permission. One ceremony uses netilat yadayim, washing of hands, as a way of creating separation between what has been and what will be. A second ceremony involves 2 cups, not unlike we use in the wedding ceremony itself. The woman might choose to use cups that have significance to her, maybe a family cup, maybe the cups used in her wedding, and or something that is a gift from a friend. In this ceremony, there will be one vessel to reject or have taken away and another one to claim. And so we also encourage women to think about what they might want in the cup. Maybe something a little more bitter in the first cup and something sweeter in the second. The final ritual involves cutting the ketubah as a symbol of severing the relationship. Yes, this is reminiscent of cutting one's clothing or a ribbon at the death of a loved one. At the ketubah signing, and often under the chuppah itself, the bride is instructed to take possession of the ketubah to show that she enters the marriage willingly and accepts the conditions stipulated there. In some circumstances, the right thing to do will be to tear or to cut the ketubah that had been used at the wedding prior to receiving the get, provided that it's available. Actions can speak louder than words. Like yachatz, the 4th step in the Seder, when we break the middle matzah without words or a blessing, in this ritual, we use action and silence to express the feelings behind the brokenness. These rituals are not exhaustive. Rather, we hope that they will act as springboards to turn a critical moment of transition, one being undergone by half of our community, into a ritual of healing, of tikkun, and of kedusha. We ask that rabbis and recipients alike feel empowered to choose the pieces that will be meaningful for them during this life-changing moment. And we hope that by doing so, women who are divorcing will no longer be shamed and confounded. Shabbat shalom.